It was a night that would forever alter my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. As a seasoned medical professional with years in hospice care, I've always clung to science, facts, and the concrete truths that guide our work. But what unfolded that evening defied explanation. A moment so profound it made me question everything I thought I knew. Let me take you back to that night. The call came late. A new admission was arriving, a patient being discharged from the hospital to spend her final hours at home. It was the kind of night every nurse dreads. Not because of the patient, of course, but because of the hour. My fatigue weighed heavily on me, and I secretly hoped this would be a quick visit. But the moment I walked into the house, all thoughts of time and exhaustion vanished. She was young, too young to be in this condition. She lay in her bed unconscious, her skin tinged with a cyanotic blue. Her lips were dark, her breathing labored and gurgling with the telltale death rattle. Every detail pointed to the same conclusion. She was hours, maybe minutes, away from passing. The air in the room felt heavy, almost expectant, as though it, too, knew what was coming. Her children, barely adults themselves, hovered nearby, their faces etched with confusion and fear. They asked questions that revealed their denial of the situation, when she might wake up, whether she could start physical therapy, how they could feed her. It was clear they didn't understand how close she was to the end. Taking a deep breath, I pulled them aside. Gently but firmly, I explained what was happening. I spoke of her changing skin color, her erratic breathing, the secretions rattling in her throat, all signs that death was near. I urged them to call any family members who might want to say goodbye. Their faces crumpled as the weight of my words sank in, but they accepted the news with grace and began making calls. Meanwhile, I stayed by her side, monitoring her condition. She remained peaceful, her face serene despite the inevitability of her situation. An hour passed, then another. Her children's relatives began arriving, their hushed voices mingling with the rhythmic sound of her labored breaths. She lingered longer than I expected, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. I reassured her children that she was comfortable and encouraged them to remain by her side. Then, reluctantly, I left. The next morning, as the sun streamed through my windows, I checked my phone for the expected notification, a report of her passing and the details of who had gone out to complete the death visit. But there was nothing. Curious, I called the office to ask who had attended to her case. No one, they said. We haven't received any death calls. My mind raced. Had her children forgotten to call? That seemed unlikely. I had been certain she would pass that night. Her symptoms left no room for hope, not in my experience anyway. To be sure, I called the family, prepared to offer my condolences and check in on how they were doing. Her son answered, his voice bright and cheerful. "Oh, last night went great," he said. "Mom woke up this morning. She said she was hungry, so she's in the kitchen eating pancakes." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My brain struggled to process his words. It was impossible. The woman I'd seen the night before had been on the brink of death. No one came back from that. "She's eating pancakes?" I finally managed. "Yeah," he replied, his voice laced with happiness. In the background, I could hear laughter and the clatter of dishes. I told him I'd be over shortly. I had to see this for myself. When I arrived, my jaw nearly hit the floor. There she was, sitting at the table, alive and well. Her skin was warm and pink, her eyes bright. She greeted me with a smile, her voice clear and strong. She was walking, talking, eating, and living. It was as though the events of the previous night had never happened. For 3 months, she lived like this, fully awake, fully present, and free of pain. Eventually, her illness caught up with her, and she passed peacefully under hospice care. But those 3 months, they defied every explanation I had. Even now, years later, I can't explain what happened, but there's a part of the story I've rarely shared, a piece of the puzzle that refuses to fit within the confines of science and reason. It's the part of the story that truly haunts me. That night, as I was settling her in bed, something happened. Her children were in another room, and I was alone with her, adjusting her pillows and ensuring she was comfortable. And then I saw it. Behind her bed, a presence emerged in my mind's eye. It wasn't a fleeting thought or a trick of the light. It was vivid, solid, and undeniable. A being stood there, massive and imposing, its presence filling the room. It was unlike any image of an angel I'd ever imagined. There were no delicate wings, no soft glow. Instead, it was tall as the ceiling, with a form that radiated power and strength. Its color was a pale cream hue, its wings folded behind its back. The being didn't acknowledge me. It stood, silent and still, entirely focused on her. It wasn't warm or soft, yet it didn't feel malevolent. It exuded a kind of protective strength, as though it existed solely for her. Time seemed to stretch in that moment, though the vision lasted only seconds. Then it was gone, leaving me to question whether I'd seen anything at all. I brushed it off at the time. Exhaustion, I told myself. Stress. But the next morning, as I stood in her kitchen watching her eat pancakes and laugh with her children, that vision came rushing back. The presence I'd seen. Could it have been real? Could it have had something to do with her miraculous recovery? I've spent countless nights replaying that moment in my mind. I've tried to rationalize it, to fit it into the framework of science that has always guided my understanding of the world, but I can't. All I know is what I saw, and what I saw was unlike anything I've encountered before or since. Was it an angel? A guardian? A messenger? I don't know. But I do know this. That night, in that room, something extraordinary happened. Something beyond my comprehension. And for reasons I may never understand, that something gave her 3 more months. 3 months of life, laughter, and love. Even now, as I share this story, I'm filled with awe and wonder. I've always believed in the certainty of science, but that night showed me there's more to this world than what we can measure and explain. Perhaps there are forces at work we can't see, beings who intervene in ways we'll never fully understand. Perhaps miracles do happen, even when we least expect them. So what do you think? Was it an angel, a miracle, or something else entirely? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Whatever the explanation, one thing is certain. That night, I witnessed something extraordinary, and it's a story I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Sometimes, life presents us with moments so extraordinary that they challenge the very foundation of what we believe to be true. These are the moments that defy logic, science, and reason. Moments that make us pause and ask, is there more to this life than we can comprehend? They might come in the form of a fleeting vision, an unexplainable miracle, or an overwhelming sense of presence that we can't quite put into words. Have you ever experienced something that made you question your reality or reevaluate your beliefs? Maybe it was a dream that felt like a message, an encounter that defied natural explanation, or a quiet moment where the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary seemed to lift. Whatever it may be, I'd love to hear your story.